Busa joins me in studio. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Busa has said that you wanted a cabinet that was compact and capable. Do you think that's what happened?
So I think it's certainly not as compact as we would have liked it to be. There has been a reduction in ministries, but there's also been an addition of deputy ministers. So that is going to be a bit of a challenge in terms of getting the efficiencies that we had hoped would come out of a smaller cabinet, the cost savings, as well as the decision-making ability, because that alignment across the ministries is absolutely key. So unfortunately, not as compact as we would have hoped. In terms of capabilities in the core economic ministry, particularly Minister of Finance, I think we certainly see a very strong minister there who's going to be continuing and who's going to drive us on the path of fiscal consolidation. So we think that was a very positive step in that regard. And I think generally, if one looks at the mix in terms of the cabinet, it seems to be a compromise cabinet. There are some very good ministers. There are some ministers that perhaps haven't got experience and the necessary capabilities, but I think some interesting choices.
People are speaking about gender representation in terms of women ministers that have been announced. What are your views on that?
So we think some of the women ministers have been put into very strategic roles, and that is very well received. So if we look at, for example, cooperative governance, we look at international relations with Minister Pandor, Minister Toko Didiza into agriculture. Those are very good signals in terms of women being put into strategic roles, complex roles, and we think that they have the capabilities to drive forward what's required.
We have an unemployment crisis in South Africa. The Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nxesi, is known by some for defending a 3.9 million rand pool and calling it a fire pool when he was Public Works Minister at the time. Do you think that that's a correct appointment and he's going to be able to drive that agenda of creating jobs and making sure we've got good labour practices?
So I think, first of all, we're really pleased with the change in the department's name, because I think it signals a shift from just labour to employment, because really the key focus of that department should be around employment, and it should be around employment for the future of work. Minister Nxesi came out of the trade union movement a long time ago. He's had experience in government. We're hoping that with some fresh thinking, it's going to drive forward a new strategy where we really do modernise our view of the labour market, because a lot of our laws have been based on the old full-time employment model of indefinite employment. That's not how the economy is operating. That's not how jobs and work are performed. South Africa is about to go to the ILO, the International Labour Organization conference, where in the centenary discussion, the discussion is around the future of work. And those are the issues that the country really needs to grapple with, is how do we look at our policy framework in light of what the future of work is offering to us and where our economy is at, and how do we actually create all these jobs that are needed.
Well, you spoke about Finance Minister Titumbo when you're returning. Pravin Gordhan's also returning to public enterprises, and there have been unhappiness from some quarters about that.
Yes, and I think really what we've got to do is allow that process to take its course, the public protector process, and allow that the courts rule on that issue. It is under review, and it's not for us to dictate where that might end up. So the fact that there is that process really needs to unfold, and we need to actually wait for the courts to rule on it.
Imran Patel is in at DTR after a long stint by Dr. Rob Davies, who's now left. What are your views on that?
So we believe it's an interesting choice. He'll bring stability. He doesn't have business experience, but hopefully he will be putting people within the department that are really going to drive forward an economic plan and implement it. And we're hoping that he's going to crowd in people from business into that department so that we can really see some considerable changes in terms of how economic policy is approached and how it's delivered.
Economic growth in South Africa can't happen based on government alone. Obviously, we need business and government to be working together, as well as other stakeholders. A constant complaint about the business community in South Africa is that there is a so-called investment strike, and that there is a lack of willingness to invest in funds that are here already, because there's always an issue around political certainty, as people call it, or certainty around policy. How do you, as Busa, try and encourage people, if at all, to make sure that they do invest in South Africa and that this isn't just government trying to work but not getting the support of big business?
So I think the fundamental issue that we've got to recognise is that for businesses to invest in a very competitive global market is that they need investor confidence and they need certainty. And that's the policy framework first and foremost. So how businesses work hand in hand with government to ensure that the policy framework is conducive but also certain is absolutely key in terms of investment decisions. I think there's been issue taken with the idea of an investment strike because the research demonstrates that there are compulsory liquidity requirements that are sitting particularly in banks that are accounting for large levels of cash. But having said that, if our economy was operating optimally and if the conditions were right, I do think that not only local business but international business would really be crowding in.
Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Tanya Cohen from Busa speaking to us about this cabinet announcement made yesterday. Nompumelelo, it's over to you.